Shalom. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to start to teach from Matthew chapter 12. This is the New International Version. I'd like to read the first section, which is entitled Lord of the Sabbath. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priest. Or haven't you read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple desecrate the day and yet are innocent? I tell you that one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. What a sad thing to end on, but what a wonderful thing to have happen. This is the story about Jesus and his disciples. They're going through a grain field, and they're plucking the heads of wheat, and they're rubbing it in their hands, exposing the meat of the kernel, and they're eating it as they go along. Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 23, this is part of the Torah. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 24 and 25, it specifically states if you can harvest some stuff on the edge of a field, and that's okay, that's acceptable. That's not considered. Actually, it was not considered harvesting. It's just that you could glean some stuff. That would you could walk through and take some handfuls of things and eat it as you go. That was not considered harvesting. That was not actually considered work. That was just considered being hungry and feeding yourself, and that was not forbidden by the law. But the Pharisees see this. They classified it as work. And of course, they couldn't wait to accuse Jesus and his disciples of breaking the commandments of the Sabbath. Now, some people ask, how were there Pharisees out there in the field seeing this and seeing what was going on? Well, there's some debate, and it's only speculation. There may have been some Pharisees walking around with Jesus and his men, always challenging him, always questioning him, always trying to find something in which they could gotcha with him. Or they may have just haven't been in the vicinity, look over, see Jesus and his disciples walking by the field, grabbing some stuff, and they may have said, hey, stop that. That's work. So that could have been it. But notice the statement that Jesus makes, when he challenges them, and he says to them, when David was hungry, he went into the tabernacle. Actually, it was the tabernacle by that time, and he ate the showbread, the consecrated bread, because that was the only bread available. They had just changed it out with fresh showbread, and so last week's showbread was still available. So David took that and ate that, and that was actually breaking a commandment, but it was okay. Nobody said anything. And then the other thing that he mentioned is that if you the priests themselves, day in and day out, they are doing work. They're picking up animals. They're butchering animals. They're sacrificing animals. They're picking up things and cleaning things. They do work every single day, whether it's a Sabbath or a holiday or a regular day. But they don't consider that breaking the Sabbath, even though they are working. And so Jesus' point is, if you had known what these words mean, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice," you would not have condemned the innocent. Now, Jesus is actually quoting Hosea chapter 6 there, as well as Micah chapter 6, when he's talking about what is more important, doing the rules or the spirit behind the rules, which is mercy. And Jesus is saying mercy is much more important than sacrifice. And then he adds something there in verse 11 and 12. In fact, verse 12 in particular, he said, how much more valuable is a man than a sheep? You know, when you lose your priorities, the things that become more important are the rules instead of the people. And this is what Jesus is challenging them on. Now, also, by the way, the Pharisees are just standing around waiting for an opportunity to gotcha. They just can't wait to get Jesus. But he is saying that healing and doing good, even on the Sabbath day, is far more important than any rules. But he makes an interesting statement. He said, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. You got to remember something. Jesus is God with us. He is the one who gave the law to Moses. He is the one that said, keep the Sabbath day, make it holy. So it's interesting that Jesus said, I'm Lord of the Sabbath. If I want to do something different, I can. It's my prerogative. And it is his prerogative, his right to do that. By the way, in Exodus 23, Deuteronomy 22, because Jesus also quotes, look, if you got a sheep or a donkey that falls into a hole or a pit, you'll do everything you can to get that sheep or donkey out, even if it is on the Sabbath day. So if you're willing to do that for an animal, how much more valuable is a man than an animal? And you and I, sometimes we lose sight of that. We begin to think that the rules, the regulations, or something, some agenda is more important, but it is not. The most important thing is doing good, no matter what day of the week it is. Yeah, one more thing that's interesting to me. The Pharisees watched this man get healed. And instead of giving glory to God, instead of being thankful and congratulating the man, hey, man, you got your arm healed. Awesome, dude. Congratulations. He didn't say that. They were figured out. They went out and they plotted, how do we kill Jesus? What a shame to reach a point where the rules are far more important than a man. Then the well-being of a person is far more important. The well-being of a person should always be far more important than any rules that we're going to keep. So I think that's something that I want to end on there. I'll pick up in the rest of chapter 12 in a minute. Thanks for joining me.